Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started with this session. May I invite people to please take a seat and don't shy away from the seats that have folders on them. You're welcome to take those. It's a goodie bag for those attending. Yeah, please come forward. Don't be shy. And we will have time for question and answers during the session. It's great to have everyone here. We're going to get started now because we have a lot to discuss in this important session. My name is Cristina Rombitis Del Rio. I'm with the Food and Land Use Coalition, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. If I could ask for my presentation to be put up in just a second. So we have a number of distinguished panelists who will be here with us today. To talk about climate resilient agriculture. And if I could just ask for the door to be closed. It's a bit noisy. I know people are still coming in, but great if you could shut the door a little bit. Fabulous. So we're here at a very important moment at COP. Today is Agriculture and Adaptation Day. And it's a very important moment in the negotiations as technical discussions are concluding and we're moving into ministerial discussions next week. And there's important decisions being made on agriculture, on the Core Anivia Joint Work Program, on financing for adaptation, on financing for agriculture. And so this discussion couldn't come at a more important time. We're here to talk about scaling up climate resilient agriculture and using the national adaptation plans, nationally determined contributions to do that. And I thought I'd just take a moment to discuss some analysis that colleagues at the World Resources Institute have done. Of course, I'm standing right in front of the QR code. But in short, they've looked at all of the NDCs that have been submitted, the first round NDCs and the second round NDCs. And I think it's really telling to show that and coded all the actions relating to adaptation within those. And I think it's really important that food and nutritional security, along with water, along with our friends across the way at the Water Pavilion, those are the top two areas of action that countries have identified as a priority. So that's the good news. Countries know that there's a need. Next slide. The bad news is that a lot of the actions don't have a time frame of action or measurable targets or indicators to tell us if they're going in the right direction or not. Next slide. They also don't have the finances identified. Thank you. They also don't have the finances identified nor the costs identified. Nor do they necessarily have measures that are specifically targeting populations, specific populations, and in particularly women and gender equity often are not incorporated. So the means of implementation, the things that we need to do to actually get action happening on the ground, those details are not fully embedded in the national adaptation and nationally determined contributions. So that's a bit of a concern, and we're going to be talking today about how do we actually drive action on the ground and hearing from examples from really across the world. You can take my slide down and bring the next slide up, if you don't mind. And it's my pleasure to really take this conversation from the world of charts and graphs and data to the ground level. And it's really my pleasure to introduce Sabrina Alba, the actress, activist, and IFAD Goodwill Ambassador. If you wouldn't mind, please come to this stage. We're really honored to have you here today. I don't know if you'd like to sit or stand, but would you be more comfortable? Great. We'll give you a microphone here. And I know you've recently...
Hello. Sorry.
Thank you for joining us. We're really honored to having you here today.
Thank you.
I know you've recently been in Kenya and Zambia with Farm Africa, traveling to the ground, meeting with communities. And I'd love to hear two things. What did you see? What did you learn from those visits? And also, of all the causes that you could dedicate your profile to. You've chosen to focus on agriculture and climate change and smallholding farmers, and we're really honored that you've done that. And I'd love to hear why. Why is this important to you?
You know, it's funny because a lot of people ask me, why agriculture? It's not necessarily the most sexy topic, but I actually learned so much about what agriculture means for rural communities from my mother. She grew up in a rural community, and they depended on the land for their food security and all their other needs. So she was really, really influential in my life as a young girl and introduced me to IFAD now, of which I am a UN Goodwill Ambassador. So when I do field visits and I get to see the work that organizations like IFAD are doing, I'm extremely humbled, because I think we can all probably say in this room how important that work is. I was also recently, like you said, at a Farm Africa field visit, and I actually cried, which is really embarrassing. I was probably at my emotional peak, and in true Kenyan fashion, everyone was like, "We're so sorry." I'm like, "No, why are you sorry? I'm sorry. I'm an emotional mess." But what I do enjoy most about those visits really is to be able to speak to people on the ground about what their concerns are, what's affecting them most, and secondly, to be able to have confidence and trust that programs like Farm Africa and IFAD are doing the work that helps people in these rural areas really get through the crisis that they're facing now. I'm Somali, and I don't know if you all know what Somalia is going through. I mean, it's coming to a 5th consecutive drought, an imminent famine. The situation on the ground is dire. So we talk about climate change in these rooms and we have these big board meetings, but what's happening on the ground every day, it's adapt or starve for rural people. So it's something that I am extremely passionate about, because I feel as a global citizen, we should all have a moral duty, not only to educate ourselves on what it means when this funding does actually get distributed and how little of it actually reaches rural people. I'm talking 1.7% of climate financing only reaches the people on the ground. And I mean, that's just unjust. These are people that feed the world. And you know, I grew up as a young African with kind of a stigma around Africans, and whether or not they're hard workers is because they're looking for aid. You know, a lot of the rural people I speak to don't want aid. They want investment. There is a time and place for aid, especially when we're going through things like famine and drought. But we need to look at long-term solutions, because we've been in these situations before. We've had these problems before. We've had drought on drought, famine after famine, and we are still finding ourselves in the same situation because I believe the funding that's being given out is actually short-sighted. If we're not including adaptation as part of the conversation, we're leaving out a huge sector of people, billions of people, and rural women who are really the face of climate change. So I did just want to say that today. I also want to thank Farm Africa for having me here, because I think some of those visits were really life-changing for me, and to be able to speak to the farmers on the ground and hear them say the same thing, it was amazing. So I just want to thank you for having me as well, and I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I hope your message also reaches the negotiators and decision makers that are in the negotiating rooms not too far away from here.
Yeah, we'll be meeting with quite a few. So.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So next we're going to be moving to our panel. I will invite our panelists to please come up to the stage and join me here in these seats. I'll introduce them all at once so that you can meet them. We have Alessandro Cruvinel Fidelis, who's the General Coordinator. Please have a seat, Alessandro, who is the Coordinator for Bioeconomy and the President of the National Council for Bioinputs and Bio-Based Agriculture, and he's with the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Livestock of Brazil. We also have Dr. Carolyn Mwangira, who's from the CGIAR and the Accelerating Impact of Climate Change Research for Africa initiative. Welcome, Caroline. We have Dr. Nam Pham from SNV Vietnam joining us. Welcome. Welcome, Nam. And then for concluding remarks, we have Harko. I just lost my notes, sorry. Harko Koster, who is the global lead for climate and business at SNV, the Netherlands Development Corporation. Welcome. Great. Well, we've been grounded in the settings from Sabrina Elba, and now I want to transition and hear from each of you about experiences that you've had in the countries where you work. And I think we're going to start with you, Alessandro, to hear about experiences from Brazil. You have a presentation to show us. I want to make a note that Brazil, we learned the other day, feeds 1 million people globally, and really takes that responsibility seriously and is looking to do it sustainably and resiliently as possible. So I'd love to hear about the innovations that are coming from Brazil to help feed 1 billion people.
Okay, Christina, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I will try to be to summarize what we're doing in terms of sustainability in Brazil. We have how we are going to make the connections between the NDCs and national adaptation plans, putting this in action. How to move from 0 to 72 million hectares with practice, good practice, sustainable practice, low carbon practice, and how to move from 0 to 1 billion tons of carbon mitigation also, making agriculture. How are we doing that, and how are we planning, and what we're doing for the next 10 years also. Of course, as Sabrina said, everybody is talking about that, how are we going to plan? We need to have initiatives for long term. Okay, so just to begin, it's important I would like to remark that financing, innovation, and governance. It's very, very important. These 3 pillars. Okay, the ABC plan, low carbon plan, agriculture that we have in Brazil. We start in a very simple way. It's important to start simple. We cannot come for the first time and bring, let's say, for example, agroecology or organic or any kind of technology that will shift the life of the farmer in 1 year. It just is not going to happen. So what we did there, we selected 6 technologies and start to work each one and making the movement for the farmers step by step. So we have the integration, crop, livestock, and forest integration. So it's a very interesting technology that the farmers start to have contact with this and start to move forward for the other technologies. But after 10 years of the first phase of ABC plan, we have now the ABC Plus. And the ABC Plus, we have these goals for 1 billion tons of CO2. We have the aim to adopt 72 million hectares and, of course, increase resilience, conservation of natural resources. All the goals of adaptation are connected. We want to have plus 30 million hectares with practices to recover and degraded pasture, 12.5 million hectares of no-tillage system. Yesterday, some guys didn't have an idea what is non-tillage. This is a picture that shows very clear how does it work, what's the importance of no-tillage. You can see a massive cover of organic matter in the soil, so it's very important for resilience, for example. This is the integrated crop livestock forestry where we have the 3 options. You have the cattle, you have the grass, you have the crop, and you have the forest in the same area, making the rotation. So it's a very interesting technology that we are using in Brazil. Of course, the commercial forestries. And I would like to highlight the bioinputs. Bioinputs is a green, I would say, revolution that is happening in Brazil, the use of bioinputs. I am responsible for the Brazilian program of bioinputs, and I go deeper in this program, the connections of bioinputs with soil, the benefits that it have, the importance of innovation with bioinputs, and also irrigated systems and waste management, and also intensive filtering. Well, the Bioinputs Brazilian program, we have a very clear goal to expand and strengthen the use of bioinputs towards sustainable development. So this is very clear. It's a public policy that we have, and we have this strategic objective. So it's part of the governance. It's very important to know what will be the strategic objectives that we are going to have. Regulatory is a very important issue. Science, technology, innovation, finance instruments, technical competence, production, foster the production of bioinputs. The farmers in Brazil are starting to make them own bioinputs inside the farms. So it's a revolution. It's something very different. So all the bioinputs that are used in Brazil now, 30% are already made by their own farmer. It's a massive difference because he will start to reduce his cost and he can have less dependence of, the chemicals, pesticides, etc. And also, in the end, the policy needs to go to the ground. So for do that, we need to have the policies in the states and municipalities. So it's very important to the municipalities and the states stay together with us because they know what are the problems that are facing. And as federal government, we give direction, put the strategy, but we need to have these policies in the ground. Just to have an example of regulatory, the bioinputs products, we have 600 products available. It was very difficult to register new products in Brazil, so regulatory is important. Now we have 100 new products per year. So for each 3 days, we have a new bioinput registered in Brazil. So it's very important. This is the pesticides market increase around 30%, but when we see the bioinputs market, it's growing at 82% per year. So we are expecting in 2025 we will have around 20% of the chemical pesticides replaced by bioinputs. So it's a revolution that is happening in Brazil also. And of course we need to talk about money. This is a public call of 72 million reais for slow release fertilizers and also for bioinputs. We launched this in the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil this year. Those are grants to develop innovation, and science and technology institutes can get the money and develop new products. I will bring to you one example of one product for 2 bacterial that has the potential to leverage the phosphorus that is retained in the soil with a potential of $40 billion. So it's just one product has this whole potential, of course, making the roots more strong, etc. And another example is the Pastomax, a second product. So it's very important to have innovation, Christina, because as you can see, the potential of one product to make the fixation of nitrogen in pastures, because in soybeans it's already known, but for pasture it's not very. We don't have many technologies for pastures, so we can reduce at least $2.5 billion per year in terms of nitrogen use. And as you know, nitrogen is 300 times more damage for the climate compared to CO2. For this reason, we are also proposing a project in the Green Climate Fund. It will be the biocarbon project. We are willing to receive $100 million to implement this next policy regarding the nitrogen fertilizations. Well, I'm finishing, and just to give an example of Daniel, this guy has 1,000 hectares, and he is, the red line is his cost, the blue line is the productivity, the yield that he has per hectare. As you can see, when he starts to use the regenerative agriculture, bioinputs, slow release fertilizers, plants recover all the technologies for sustainable technologies, he starts to reduce his cost, and now his guy, of course, is very happy for the amount of money that he's making. And it is very important for the program that the farmer needs to, not just to change because it's good, but also because he will make money having more sustainable agriculture.
The difference between those two lines is profit.
Excellent, yes. And of course, in the long term, low cost food, and it's a very strong connection with food security.
Fantastic.
And
I might ask you just to wrap up in 1 minute
of course.
or so.
Capacity building, we have also the BioFab Labs and Innovation Bioinputs Network that we are organizing. And just to summarize, financing, innovation, and very, very important is the governance of the whole process.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. It's great to see the innovation that's coming, and I frankly didn't know that bioinputs really had this much power to save money, to improve the health, to reduce fertilizer and pesticide use, and of course that makes the agriculture system more resilient in many different ways. We're going to go next to Dr. Nam to hear from Vietnam, where you've been involved, from what I understand, in taking the national development, the clicker, yes, the national development, the NDCs, and making them more implementable, and of course bringing in a very important lens on gender, which we saw was missing from the global picture. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, and ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm very happy to share with you Vietnam experience on the mainstreaming NDC into the provincial level, and this go directly into the action on the ground. That is all about this COP27 is all about. This is the together for implementations, and I just want to share with you the good news that the government of Vietnam has just updated NDC 4 days ago. And then you know that they have like a double of emission reduction, and then they have a long-term strategy on adaptation. And the most important part is the increased participation of the youth and the women in all of the area on the mitigation, adaptation, and climate policy. So you may want to update your slide about Vietnam NDC.
Absolutely.
So all of these, how to translate all of the commitment, international commitment, and like for the net zero, the methane, the just energy transition into the national policy and to the provincial. I think that is crucial for the partnership that we did last year to show the complicated issue, because you know there's a lot of partnership with SNV and NDC partnership together with the World Resource Institute and the government of Germany and Netherlands. This make possible. And when you see the Vietnam greenhouse gas emission, you can see a lot of sector like energy, agriculture, waste, industrial process. They emit a lot of CO2. But the only sector that sequesters carbon is the forestry. That's why I think it's very important to how to translate those targets into the priority province, where the forest area is have like a 50% of cover. And that's where we partner with the World Resource Institute and some of the very genius scientists to develop a green economic model to show, okay, what is the net zero 2050? Tell me what is the result for 2050 look like. So basically you can see on the graph here, that's very simple. This is GDP growth rate 2050, and at the same time greenhouse gas reductions. This is the business model that already work in 25 countries that you heard from the graph before. And the main contribution of the Lâm Đồng province is where you have like potential for renewable energy of the wind and solar. And then you come to the agriculture and food system, you will have like zero emission vertical farming, a lot of high-tech farming that reduce emission. You want to have agroforestry system and nature-based solution that promotes the food system transformation. And lastly, you see there's a lot of sector. In the most important one is the forest. 3 words only: protection, management, and restoration. Those action is really crucial to contribute to the net zero target. And the most important part of all of the land use planning, they have every universally there's a 5 activity, 5 step, any planning. So when you want to have the gender sensitive in framework into this land, you have basically the 5 steps, and you have the analysis, you have the set data disaggregate, and you have like a stakeholder responsible for gender, and you have like the budgeting for the gender. This is budgeting is not everybody is talking about, and that is the missing link in the NDC. And then the final one is to how to measure and measure the outcome. And then the cycle is continue happening, and that is this great about this gender sensitive framework. And the final message I want to share with you about only 2 things. So basically, what you develop a national plan. There's 200 countries already make a commitment, and then you have to translate that into the subnational and to the local action. So that you need impact-driven finance, and you have to be very specifically for the how much for the agriculture, how much for the food system with the gender sensitive, and what is for the vulnerable community. Yeah, and I shared again that's the partnership between the public, the private, and also the producer, the farmer who is be engaged and in the designing and implementing the project. And the final one, final message is that when you order your next cup of coffee, please order the responsible and deforestation-free coffee, like the coffee you have every morning here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nam. A memorable final message there, but I really appreciate how you talked about bringing this national policy document down to this subnational and local level and really grounding it in the means of implementation and finance and budgeting. And more importantly, gender is not an add-on, it's key to implementation, which I think is something we need to appreciate. So I think might have a protest coming by or some singing. Great. Awesome. Next, we're going to go to you, Carolyn, to hear about, we've sort of traveled the world today from Latin America to Vietnam, who has long been a climate and agriculture leader, now to Africa, to hear about some of the work that you've been doing on both combining the innovation front, but also policy and policy engagement to scale up climate resilient agriculture in Africa. So would love to hear how you're doing this, especially the acceleration part, because we need that.
Thank you, Christina. So maybe I'll want to take up from where Alessandro stopped, because Alessandro was pointing to a case of a farmer in Brazil with 100 hectares. For us in Africa, a lot of our smallholder farmers have less than 1 hectare. So it's a really very different scenario. So paint a case of Eastern Africa, an example, where you have a smallholder farmer. On average, the male-headed household farm is going to have 0.4 hectares. Your female-headed farmer is going to have 0.2, half of that. In 1 year, your male-headed household could be having incomes of around $500 from selling about 800 kilograms of grain through that year. And your female farmer is going to have maybe $166 in the whole year. So, and Sabrina started and said about we are in the 5th consecutive drought in the Horn of Africa. So how do you sustain livelihoods? How do you foster climate adaptation in such context? One of the things we see in especially sub-Saharan Africa, where most of our work, I come from the CG, and I'm based in Kenya, but our work is across the whole region of Africa. So what we are seeing is that one of the reasons that we see very high impacts of climate change is because of lack of sustainable and scalable climate responsive solutions. And that's what we are trying to address. And one of the things we want to tackle is the question of also how do we make sure that their solutions are inclusive and gender responsive. Because I have painted a case where in your female farm, you're going to find, for instance, we did a study in East Africa, and we visited over 1,000 farms in Uganda and Tanzania. And what we found in those farms is that the female headed farms, what you typically find is that they're going to be more open to, for instance, look at energy smart solutions and technologies at the household level. But the male-headed farms, you're going to find them having improved varieties. They're going to be having water technologies. And when you go back to try to understand why is that the case, you find a picture of smart breeds, improved breeds, water technologies cost money. So the man is likely to have the assets, the resources, the incomes. You remember already he's having almost twice the amount of incomes that the woman has in the same farm. So that already tells you why we need to really look at those nuances, how gender is limiting, is contributing to the limitations that we find. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of how we are tackling this challenge. We have now, we are just midway, we have a 3-year project where we were challenged by the World Bank to look at how do we accelerate the impacts of research to adapt to climate change in Africa. So we have been looking at 3 concrete examples. And one of them has been looking at sustainable financing. And what we are doing in this case is looking at how we can be able to link smallholder farmers with the financing through, for instance, SMEs. So the model we are using is working with SMEs, and SMEs because we found that in the food markets in Africa, typically if you want to have transformation, the most and easiest and most rapid way of fostering transformation in terms of livelihoods is through SMEs. So typically you find your SMEs in the food systems in Africa have a cascading effect because they are working with a group of farmers or cooperatives. So what we are trying to do is also make sure that we link them with the financing, but this financing is going to go through investing in climate adapted technologies for the cooperatives they support. So in this case, what we do is that we make sure we, for instance, have the SMEs onboarded and taken through a boot camp where we are training them about climate smart agriculture technologies, how they can invest in those technologies, how they can also have gender smart investing so that they're investing also in women businesses. And so that is one of the things that we are doing. And some of the things like was being presented in the session before was also like the accelerated grants that are also being given to those SMEs to foster the adoption of climate smart agriculture practices.
Carolyn, we're running short on time, and I do want to hear about number 2 and 3. So,
okay, so very quickly, the second thing I want to emphasize is that for us, we find that partnerships is very important. And so what I wanted to say is that we are grounding partnerships from local to national to regional level, because if you have to translate the NDCs into implementation, we found that we need to really be able to go down to ground level partnerships, which is an opportunity also for co-developing those technologies, validating those technologies, as well as cross-learning. So we also look at having spillovers where we are addressing solutions and linkages, not only in one country, but across. So we take a regional approach. And the last one is also talking about just also the power of looking at testing those technologies and validating them on the ground. So that's, I could summarize it as what we are really working on. Yeah.
Do you want to say a minute or 2 on what the testing looks like? I didn't mean to truncate
yes,
you
so
much.
The testing is really to test what is a bundle, because we are looking at how we bundle technologies so that they can be accelerated. So for instance, how we bundle natural resource management technologies with water technologies. And also now we are coming up with something we are also calling gendered bundles. What's a bundle that, for instance, a woman is likely to adopt? So we look at those bundles and then we work with the SMEs to scale. So for instance, bundling a market service with climate information, yeah, so with a seed that the woman would want, you put it in one bundle and you approach them with that as one single solution, not just, so you bring the ecosystem of actors to develop, to come together, they approach the farmer with one solution.
Yeah.
But behind that, you have several partners who are supporting the bundle.
Fantastic. You've really brought it together there with that last comment in a package. So it's access to finance, access to a bundle of technologies, particularly targeting women and understanding what women need in a really shrewd way to help accelerate the pace of change and adoption there. Fantastic. I think we have time for maybe one quick question. Do we have any questions from the audience here? Oh, I was managing time too carefully. Yes, we have a question in the back, sir. If we could get a microphone over to you. Please tell us who you are and your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Dereje. I'm from IGAD. It's a long acronym, Economic Community. Two quick questions with regard to smallholder farmers. One of the issues that's coming up is profitability. I mean, it's not even paying back to the family as a business when you look at the whole market chain. What is your observation in that direction? Number two is Caroline, on your issue number one. It looks like very much of where government is functioning, it's an extension service or a private sector service. Where is CGR fit into that number one description of yours of tasks that you have described? Thank you.
Great. Carolyn, do you want to take those? I think the first was about return on investment, if I heard correctly. Yeah, and then the second one I think was on, I couldn't hear very well, but it was on governance and the need of having functioning extension services in order to deliver the... Sorry, linking SMEs. Sorry, say it again and hold the microphone very close to your mouth because it's quite loud.
My question was, it was focusing on linking SMEs with smallholders. Huh?
Got it.
So this looks like it's either the private sector task or the task of extension service through government. And where is CGR fit into that? That's the question I want to ask.
Carolyn, do you want to take those two?
Okay, yes. So, of course, government-led extension is still a critical part, but we know there's a big gap. And extension services have not been staffed and funded adequately, and the situation has not been changing the last maybe 2 decades. So I would say like we have one extension officer on average in Africa for every 1,400 farmers. So the public model of extension is not adequate. And that's why I feel like private-led support is seeming to be moving very quickly, and especially through digital tools and technologies. That's what we are seeing as one of the ways that we are scaling information across Africa. That's the one that's really been solving that challenge. Yeah, so the CG is also really on board in terms of accelerating information sharing, knowledge through both digital tools and traditional tools. But we're really taking on digital approach because of the aspect of scalability. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I want to turn to closing remarks to Harko to synthesize and bring this together, if you might. There's so much rich content, so over to you, Harko.
Thank you. No, what a fantastic panel. I think, yeah, it brings in from the whole world and also different partners, which is, I think, very important. We have government, research organization, and implementing actors. The urgency is clear. Adapt, or starve. We hear today. So I think it's great that we hear that the ambitions have been increased. That's good. Commitments today, we are hearing several commitments to put agriculture in the center of the discussions at COP. That's better, but what's best is action. So that's what we need. And we still see that, for example, during the Finance Day that SMV organized, only 4% of public finances, climate finance is going to agriculture. Without that, we cannot start action. But what we are not asking for aid, we're asking for investment. So I think I have 3 messages that I take out of here. First, for implementation, we need to cost things, budget, and then mobilize investments. I think the Brazil example and the Vietnam example shows this pathway is very clear and has the transformation to scale. That is important. The second main takeaway that I have is localize, either from national to local, like what we saw in Vietnam, bringing down those high-level ambitions to the province makes it clear what it is. Is it about energy? Is it about agriculture? Is it about food? And also make it clear what is the role of vulnerable populations, of young girls and women, boys and men, and differentiate your pathways. I think the example of gender bundles, technology bundles, everyone has different solutions. Make them clear and also budget them, like we've seen. Finally, I think the importance of partnerships. None of these organizations will achieve if they don't work together. I think the government has an important role in aligning the policies at regional level and national level. This bioeconomy is a great example of really transforming not just the actions but also the policies to enable that, regulations, for example. Second, research. I think Embrapa, CGIAR have to provide the data and the research that this is viable, that they are bring that there is a business case here. And third, the implementation agencies. To roll out, to mobilize investments, and really attract also private sector participation and may ensure that it goes to the farmer, to the SMEs, and so on. So I think, well, these are my 3 takeaways, and thank you very much.
Fantastic, Arco. I hope you wrote those down so we can copy them. I want to thank the panel for incredible presentations today. I want to thank SNV for incredible partnership in coordinating and co-organizing this session at the Food Systems Pavilion. And last but not least, in my excitement earlier at seeing Sabrina Elba, I forgot to mention a report that is on your chairs from the Food and Land Use Coalition and UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. It's a report that looks at the NDCs and specifically with regard to food and food systems transitions. So looking at where food security figures in, where food loss and waste, where protecting nature, where a variety of different actions that are important for food systems transformations figure or don't figure in some of the nationally determined contributions. So I really encourage you to take a look at this and see what the analysis reveals. Thank you very much to all of our panelists here and to our participants. Have a good rest of your day. I keep learning more and more and wanting to take notes on all these presentations. Thank you so much. It's really interesting. Fantastic to meet you. Really interesting work. Yeah. I really like the bringing it down to the local level. That's so important to make it happen. You're much taller than I thought. I bet you hear that a bit. You're helping us to get on this. Great, And Marco, those remarks, I really do hope you wrote them down because that's spot on.